it's not just having a television show. It's educating people to make them more aware of things that they weren't aware of. And through that education, they have a better lens on improving their life. So intention, those two things are really, really important into the practice.
Brilliant. Now, I've also found out that you've co-authored a book.
Yes, I co-authored and I wrote one. So I wrote one book.
Oh, so there's two.
There's two.
Oh.
My book is called The Alchemy of Change.
Okay.
And in fact, I'm on a second edition right now.
Brilliant.
And I wrote that initially when I was leaving for Africa. All my students were saying, well, you got to leave us something. And so during COVID, I had already done the manuscript, but during COVID, I had 6 months. I was in Kenya and I couldn't leave. And so I wrote and finished the book and did the photographs and so forth and so on and got it published. And so I really liked that, but then because I started from my students' requests, and then after thinking about it and now putting the wellness in it and so forth and so on and all like that, I said, you know, this is not really the book I wanted to write if I was going to write this book. But it was a start. It was to say that I completed something and that I can move on now. I know the pains of writing a book, and now I know how to do it better.
Right.
And then the second book is I co-authored. Actually, I co-advised. So one of my students came and said, hey, I want to do this book, and I want to call it Transform. And so, you know, I asked him some questions and so forth and so on. And he said, but I really like to get your advice in the process. And I said, I can advise you and so forth. And so we went back and forth. I'm in Ethiopia now, and he's in California, and we're writing back and forth. And he says, hey, this is my draft. Can you add something to this? So I gave him notes and said, okay, this is kind of, I'm always looking for the purpose through the purpose. So this is really the purpose of this, the underpinnings of what you're writing about. And so he named the book Transformation Tai Chi. And again, it was a good start. And then we're also in the process of revising that. Okay. But good starts. But I really...
So where can we get the book, though?
If
we want.
On apple.com.
Okay.
The Alchemy of Change is on there as a digital copy. And then on apple.com and on Amazon, Transformation Tai Chi is there.
It's there. How do you implement applied techniques to healing art?
When I'm teaching, my students have homework.
Okay.
So say, for example, our class was about listening to oneself. So if they don't, so at the end of the week, they have to have a practice of taking that practice out into the world and practicing listening, right? Or, for example, something a little bit breathing and meditation are some of the key tools to really unlocking the psyche of some of the things that, that we can't let go, right? But there's two wings of meditation. And so meditation is designed to be with, right? So whatever is there, we are with it. But sometimes we need something else, and that's to work with. So sometimes we have to get off the cushion and do the work of what's not being resolved, right? I know people that can sit on the cushion for hours, right? And they look good and so forth and so on, but they're terrible people, right? So no, I won't say terrible. They just got their own issues they haven't resolved, right? And that's the difference. And we have to recognize that. In meditation, you learn to be with. In Tai Chi, you learn how to be with and how to work with. So you have both wings of the practice together. Because, it's like, even if you're doing Tai Chi, last week I was telling my students, Tai Chi takes you from the passenger and return you to the driver. So, as we get older, we've become habitual, how we walk, how we talk, and so forth and so on. And we forget. I mean, I know myself, it's like, I think I'm 25 or 23. And so I said, I could do that. And sometimes, most of the time I can. And I have to, just really come back to center and do it from a centered place versus doing from a habitual place, right? Having our conversations, right? Coming, again, returning to center, centering ourselves, being prepared, right? Being sick. One of my friends hates me when I get sick because they say, go to the hospital, go to this, and I said, no, I need to listen to what is going on in my body. If I have to go to the hospital, I can tell the doctor or physician or whoever I'm talking to what actually is happening.
Exactly.
Right? Right? Not that I'm sick. And not the branches, it's like, oh, I got a nose or something like that. No, what's happening? Being aware of that. So you can actually start treating yourself.
Right.
It's just having that sense of awareness, that sense of listening, right? And then, I know one of the hardest parts for me is listening to myself, the intuitive self, that is telling you something and you don't listen to it, right? And then you slap yourself upside the head and say, I knew that. So, these type of embodied arts actually return you to your natural self so you can pay attention, right? So you can explore your intuitive self, that you can stop the chronic diseases that are caused by stress and trauma, generational, historical trauma that happens in our life, that we can start saying, I really need help, to be able to ask for it and to know what we need, right? Not just someone to come and say, oh, poor thing. No, I need your help. I need support, right? And being able to, be with that. And I know initially my Zen teachers would always tell me, you got to ask for what you want, right? And I would go, I'm not going to ask that, right? But over time, after 5 years,
you learned.
and is that, understanding, you give people the permission to say no, right? You give people the permission to say no. And at the same time, you might be surprised when people say yes, right? So that is tremendously important. And it was really a lesson that I learned when I was on a street retreat. So one of the practices in the Zen practice is that we would live on the street for a couple of days.
Wow.
Right? And I did my street retreat in the Bay Area during the winter. Oh yeah, it was cold. But we slept like everybody else. We had to find boxes, and we did a begging practice. And the begging practice was probably the worst for me because hearing no over and over and over again, right? But again, these are embodied practices, so they're more than just doing form.
Exactly.
Right? It's just more than movement. It's like, oh, you got to bring that into the world, off the mat and into the world. And so these practices allow you to actually explore yourself and find who you really are. Not who you thought you are or what your parents told you were going to be. Who are you? Right? All the skeletons you've been hiding in the closet, pull them out.
They're coming out.
Yeah.
Wow. Now, you talked about acupuncture, and one of your specialties or practices is nada.
Yes. Not a protocol, which
Exactly.
is an acupuncture protocol, which we start from the ear. Within the ear has points for all of the organs in the body. So it was initially, well, where it was, one of the places that it was used effectively.
Can we first tell them what nada is?
Yes.
And I was like, whoa. So it's an acupuncture detoxing.
Detox, right.
Yes.
So it's a detoxing process, and where we, like when 9/11 hit the U.S. and they had the planes run into the planes in New York, nada was the thing that most people chose because people didn't want to talk about the trauma and the stress. So the acupuncturists placed needles in their ears and gave them an herbal tea that they could drink, and that actually helped them to relax and detoxify. And they sat for an hour and they felt much better, right?
Wow. So this method actually helps through that too.
Right. Through the
detoxification.
Through the detoxification. So like for alcohol abuse, drug abuse, trauma and stress, it cuts through it.
Wow.
Right? Now, it's not it's not an instant pill.
No.
Right. But it's a process.
Yeah.
And it's it's like, people, when those type of incidents occur, you have a therapist, right? And it costs you maybe $75 to $100 an hour for a therapist, if you're lucky.
No, especially these days.
But nada allows you to be still. It is treating you. And then after we do the initial treatment, we put ear seeds on the ear.
Okay.
And therefore, if the person is feeling some tension or pain, they can just press where the ear seed is, and it activates into the body. So again, it's a cooperative method of healing. So we do the acupuncture, and acupuncture, we're hitting the points and so forth and so on, and we're triggering the meridians in the body, and like I said, connecting to pain and so forth and so on. And that's the basic protocol, because it can expand to headache or smoking or whatever. But it's that the individual is not just being treated, but they can treat themselves.
You have about 9 certifications.
Maybe that I probably write in my bio. It's probably more than that.
Yeah, just stick with the 9.
Yeah.
But out of the 9, there are 2. 2 of them are, one of them is conflict resolution facilitator, and the other one is nonviolent communications facilitator.
Yes.
Now, you being in Africa, I would like to know if you've been able to use that knowledge throughout Africa, or have you been asked to facilitate, knowing that we have issues?
Yes. I have a little bit in Kenya, working with my team and introducing them to nonviolent communications and what that is. And then I was asked to go to Ghana, was it a year or 2 years? I can't remember. And actually, I provided a class it was for people who wanted to come to Africa, repats, that were interested in, and so actually we got to discuss the violence in our language, right? And how it's just common, right? And so then people started to get, it's a practice though, because a lot of things are habitual. A lot of things are habitual, so we, at some point, we don't think about our language. Again, we've gotten so used to it. I think one of the first incidents that in Ethiopia, that I was coming out of the National Theater and that there was an elder or someone that was asking for money, and I just noticed that just the sounds of, I can't make that sound yet, but in a disregard, I don't want to be engaged with this individual. But I just, it's like, I had to think, if this was a child crying on the street, would I not stop and ask what was wrong? Mm-hmm. Right? And we're all children. So instead of going to the default, I listened, and that's all he wanted to do, is to talk and have someone listen. And after I listened, then he was well. He walked on his way, right? So that's a part of the nonviolent communications. It's like what we say and how we say it has tremendous impact, right? And so being able to, and then really speaking from our perspective, and instead of blaming the other individual, right? So there are many components to the nonviolent communication, empathy being one of them. And so it is something that is a part of Tenesu, the part of the, I have like a core class called Envisioning Wellness. Okay. And the core class talks about nonviolent communications and also conflict resolution. They kind of go hand in hand. And how we resolve problems. Because one of my first classes in Ethiopia, we did the Envisioning Wellness. And this woman, she worked for the government. And she worked with contractors, and that she was saying that she couldn't get them to do what she needed to do. Mm. And after her class, she came up with many strategies. And then she said, it works. Mm-hmm. It works. They're doing what needs to be done. And it boiled down to really communicating, going back to the listening, right? And, some people I found in Ethiopia are working in positions that they don't want to work in, right? They went to school just because of how the system is. They were chosen to do in a particular profession. And so there's resistance, right? Even though they go to work and they get a paycheck, there's resistance. So if there's that resistance, they're doing something that they don't want to do, and you're trying to tell them how to get something done. You're like talking to a wall.
Exactly.
So again, going back to starting the communications in a way that they're more willing to help you, right? Because then they can help themselves.
True.
So.
How do you support the development and restoration of holistic communities?
Well, fortunately, I do crowdfunders right now. I have a board in California. We have had some interested parties that want to do more investment, but there's a criteria for that. And some of them don't meet it because this is Afrocentric. And so I know I'm pushing away people, but this is an Afrocentric perspective of healing, and so the money that comes in must be African-centric, right? It must be people who believe in the issue of evolution and evolving, and to rise, right, and support that, and don't have another agenda.
Yeah, right.
Right. But it's like I'm kind of opening up a door called allies. If you want to be an ally,
that might be good.
Yeah, if you want to be an ally, you can contribute. just know that you don't have control of anything that happens in the operations of what we're doing.
Right.
Right. And you're making that distinction. Usually people, there's always something tied to money.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
And so, and that's one of our values is we make the difference between money and currency. So one of our values is currency. And this is something that I learned as I was in the Zen temple, is that you give dana, right? And it's non-attached. And when you give dana, you give what you can. And if you can't, then you be of service, right? So you give what your value is. So for example, and that's how I kind of run the organization. If I'm having an event or if I'm doing a women empowerment program, you don't have the money, don't worry about it. What can you bring to it? I need someone that can take notes or can do a spreadsheet or all the many talents that people have that they subjugate when they see a price tag.
Right.
And say, oh, I don't have this. But you do have value.
Exactly. What do you have?
And
There's
and
a lot
so
we can use from people.
So that's again, that's how. But the answer is right now is grants, personal contributions. In fact, if I get everything done in December, I'm going to start another fundraiser, so it can fund all the programs for next year, and then we'll have another funding once. So Ghana gave me land. I have 25 acres.
Oh, brilliant. So you're going to build your center.
And we're going to build it.
Brilliant.
And so I'm still hoping that I can partner with someone here in Ethiopia and and build something here. Because I've had an architect that has worked on some of the designs and they're just beautiful. And I want that to also act as a model that we don't have to create these pencil-shaped buildings and call it progress. We can create buildings that reflect our heritage and who we are. Right?
Is it an Ethiopian architect?
Yes. Yeah, she's an Ethiopian architect.
She's a she, too.
It's a she.
I like that.
Feminine,
I like that.
Definitely. There's always, like I said, there's that balance of masculine and feminine.
Yeah.
And I really stress more the feminine approach. I think men have screwed things up enough.
Let's try the women. Give them a chance.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And that goes back to my childhood. I was raised by women.
Yes.
And so I have tremendous respect to listen. And then I hold basically, I know how to organize. Okay, that's my lane. I'll organize it, and you guys run with it. So
Beautiful. How do you engage communities to understand when they are provided with wisdom, knowledge, and safe spaces? People and communities heal.
People in communities heal when they feel safe. Right? And when they feel supported, right? And that's the whole idea, is to create these safe places where we can have those open communications without fear, right? That's the first part of healing. Sometimes we go into the doctor with all this fear or something's wrong and so forth and so on. I know my mother, when she was alive, she would go to the doctor and she said, the doctors never listened to me, because she was an elder. And I was like, she knew what was going on, because she knew all the traditional medicine. So when she went to the doctor, she had to go to the doctor. And so to be able to be heard is one of those things, because sometimes we're not heard. And that has an impact. That pulls a thread out of us, that we feel that we're not heard and that we're not seen. So creating these safe places, one provides a place where you can be seen and heard.
And now that you brought that up, and you coming from the US, where a lot of African Americans are not seen or heard, how do you implement this in their, because I'm sure you've taught there.
It's like going back into the belly of the beast.
Yeah, right.
Right? And this is one of the things that drove me to coming to Ethiopia and coming to Africa in general. Because what I would hear is that people would go to retreats, they would feel great. And in 2 to 3 weeks, they were back where they were. So you have to create an environment that is supportive and that can give you, solutions to that. Because, in the U.S., it's a what have you done for me lately type of environment. And sometimes even nonprofits get caught into that string, or the leadership gets caught up into it. So it's not an easy thing, but I've been talking to a friend of mine who has a nonprofit organization in, I believe it's in Louisiana. And what we've been talking about is having branches that are almost like clinics, that we can address the issues to a certain extent and give them support and connect them with other people, that they can have that support. And then what I'm hoping is they can get out of their comfort zone and make a trip to Africa. And then, because I think in that, more as she and I talk, the more I realize that it is necessary for people in diaspora to, in order to be healed, you got to recognize you're sick, right? So we start from there, is recognizing, oh yes, and then recognizing the causes. And then we can do the work.
Right. It's a process.
Right. It's like, again,
it's a
making the invitation,
Yeah.
moving the obstacles out of the way so we can advocate for what we want.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
That's beautiful. What integrative embodied practices for transformation do you teach?
Well, I mean, basically, we've
them.
kind of been talking about this integrative approach,
Exactly.
right? So, we start with, so we have Taiji, which has its own methodology, philosophy, and ideologies, right? And we merge it with things like nonviolent communications, conflict resolution. We look at all 360 parts of wellness. So we look at our environment and so forth and so on. So that's integrative. And then, it's like we move it from the classroom to our personal life. So there's a practice, right? Practice, practice, practice. So we say we want to do something, but until we make it a daily practice, and we do it at least for 21, 27 days, then we can't create the change that we want.
Right.
So we need an expanded time period of doing these practices so we can return to our humanity. So that's the integrative component. And it's like I'm always listening for other approaches and thinking. And so it's not just me. What I hope is to create a network of practitioners that can come or who already live here. The only requirement that they have to do is envisioning wellness. So we are all on the same page, right? We can't, take a doctor from New York and come here and say, hey, it's not going to happen because they don't, they're not going to have that same sensibility to the culture and to the people, which requires time and which requires understanding. And so eventually building a network of local and national healers to come together and exchange thoughts and processes, and then teaching 10. That's my philosophy. Each one teach 10. So not only are we going to be the healers, the quote unquote saviors, but our healing practice is to teach others how to teach, to go out in the world and do the work themselves.
Yeah. We're coming to the end of our nice discussion. This is going to be my last question.
Okay.
How do you provide innovative wellness practices for personal and community well-being?
That's really simple. As like my professional background being a project manager, first thing you do have to do is an assessment.
Right.
Right, to understand what the community needs. So you have to listen to them. Now, they may not understand what the underpinnings of the problems are, but they will give you clues.
Okay.
Right? It's just like when I was doing cultural diversity in the States for corporations. I would go there, observe the corporations, listen to the executives, listen to the workers, and then come up with a solution. But I wouldn't be able, I started off with, it has to be end to end, top to bottom. Everybody has to be engaged. Otherwise, it's not going to work. It's not like a leader, go to that training.
No.
Been there, done that.
Everybody has to be involved.
Everybody has to be.
I'm sorry, I lied. I have one more. Do you see yourself as an American, an African, or a global citizen? What is your vision and mission for Africa to thrive and envision a new world?
That's a good question. I don't tie myself to any nationality because those are just really nation states, agreements, and I see something bigger.
Beautiful.
Right? I would love to see a united Africa, of course, sold with wellness, and I really have strong hopes that if we work together, we will come up with a different narrative, right, than the narrative that has been told to us that we've bought into. And we start really looking into ourselves. And when I say ourselves, not just the physical body of ourselves, but the ground which we stand on, the plants, the animals, the way we do things, and start looking at, and possibly we can save the world from the, it seems like we're on the right now, if we're on that train, we're going over the cliff.
Right.
And so, that's really my vision. And, it's like my vision is limited because I see this work for 7 generations in the future, right? Is that I realize as much as I try to crack that door to see the future, based on my experiences, based on where I come from, there are limitations to my sight right now. And every day I get up and I go, can I peek? But, it's, my vision is not with me, it's for the future and future generations. So what I hope to do is to build networks, communities, mentoring, and who can carry the football, as you were, use that sports metaphor, forward, right? All too often we have leadership or visionaries that take the weight on their shoulders, and that's not well, right? That to be able to spread it out, to make sure people understand the direction, and also have the tools to be able to navigate, right? To make changes. Right. As long as they have is this wellness, right? As a guiding principle, then the future is full of promise.
Well said. We have finished our discussion. So what I'm going to ask you is, since we in Africa, especially the youth, is huge population.
Yes.
So I would like you to close with an advice to our young generation who's about to take over the world.
Advice for the young generation: you are the future. In fact, I would tell them, you are now the ancestors, right? That no longer you have to remove just what is good for you, but what is good for the future, right? You have to be able to discern and measure your choices moving forward. Some things will look like golden apples and actually be rotten. So having that critical thinking, read as much as you can, challenge as much as you can, and then revise, revise, revise. And know your history. You know, bottom line, you got to go from there. If you don't know who you are, and I'm not talking about the superficial thing that people tell you who you are, but really deeply understand your history.
Dig it.
Yeah. That then you can't grow. What is possible? We can, it's like, we can look at history and there's a narrative there, right? And typically it's linear, right? But history is not linear, right? So we have to also, as young people, they have to look at that this linear line that we're drawing, this will get us to that, is not true. Because at any point in the timeline, that timeline can be splintered and we're going in a different direction. And it may not be the direction that you thought you were going into. So you have to have that discernment and balance to be able to say, is this the right decision? For not just myself, going back to that intention, what is my intention that is inclusive of myself, but greater than myself? And we have to have that particular intention and get out of the selfish my or I perspective. That would be
beautiful. Thank you very much. Well, I hope everybody enjoyed our discussion today with Tageng.
Tageng.
Yes, Tageng Zochi Young. I thank you very much for giving us this opportunity. I hope you guys tune in on African Renaissance television services on Saturdays from 4 to 5. Thank you very much. This is your host, Katsalork Seifu, and the show's name is Afreeqa. Thank you.